The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the royal gardens. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest, as I watched the ethereal figure glide between the rose bushes. Her gossamer gown shimmered in the pale light, and for a moment I wondered if I was dreaming. But the chill night air against my skin and the scent of damp earth told me this was no dream. This was real, and it was about to change everything. I'm Alfred, the night watchman of the royal gardens, and until tonight, my life had been as mundane as the hedges I tended. But as I watched the mysterious woman vanish into the maze, I felt a shift in the air, as if the very fabric of my existence was being rewoven. With trembling hands, I reached for my flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. The rational part of my mind screamed at me to call for backup, to alert the palace guards, but something deeper, a curiosity I couldn't explain, propelled me forward. As I entered the maze, the hedges loomed over me, their leaves whispering secrets I couldn't quite hear. The beam of my flashlight danced across the gravel path, illuminating nothing but more twists and turns. Where had she gone? And more importantly, who was she? I turned a corner, and there, lying on the ground, was a delicate silk handkerchief. I picked it up, my fingers tracing the intricate embroidery, a coat of arms I didn't recognize. It wasn't the royal crest, that much I knew. As I held it up to the light, a faint scent wafted from the fabric, jasmine and something else, something chemical. A twig snapped behind me, and I whirled around, my heart leaping into my throat. But there was nothing there, just shadows and silence. I took another step forward, and suddenly the ground gave way beneath me. I fell, tumbling through darkness, leaves and branches whipping at my face. I landed hard on a cold stone floor, the air knocked from my lungs. As I gasped for breath, I realized I was in some kind of underground chamber. The walls were damp, covered in moss and lichen, and there, carved into the stone, was a symbol, a serpent wrapped around a crown. My mind raced. What was this place? How long had it been here, hidden beneath the carefully manicured gardens? And what did it have to do with the woman I'd seen? I fumbled for my radio, but it was dead, smashed in the fall. I was alone, cut off from the world above. As panic began to set in, I noticed something glinting in the corner of the chamber. I approached cautiously, my flashlight revealing a small metal box. With shaking hands, I opened it. Inside was a stack of letters, yellowed with age. I picked up the topmost one, my eyes widening as I read the first line. My dearest Amelia, the plan is in motion. The royal family suspects nothing. I froze, my blood running cold. What had I stumbled upon? A conspiracy? Treason? I wanted to read more, but a sound from above made me jump. Footsteps, growing closer. I quickly stuffed the letter back into the box and looked for a place to hide. But there was nowhere, just bare stone walls and the hole I'd fallen through. The footsteps stopped, and I heard voices, hushed but urgent. Are you sure he came this way? Positive. He saw too much. We can't let him leave. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart thundering in my chest. They were looking for me. But why? What had I seen that was so dangerous? As the voices grew louder, I made a split-second decision. I grabbed the metal box and wedged myself into a small crevice in the wall, praying the shadows would hide me. A rope ladder unfurled from above, and two figures descended. In the dim light, I could make out their faces I recognized. Palace guards, men I'd worked alongside for years. But there was something different about them now, something cold and dangerous in their eyes. He's not here, one of them growled. Check the other passages, he couldn't have gone far. As they moved deeper into the chamber, I saw my chance. With my heart in my throat, I scrambled up the rope ladder, emerging into the cool night air. I ran, clutching the metal box to my chest, not daring to look back. I didn't stop until I reached the small cottage at the edge of the grounds where I lived. Once inside, I bolted the door and sank to the floor, my mind reeling. What had I gotten myself into? With trembling hands, I opened the box again and began to read. The letters spoke of a plot spanning decades, of secrets buried so deep they could tear the monarchy apart. And at the center of it all was a name that made my blood run cold. Victoria, the current queen. As I read, pieces began to fall into place. The mysterious woman in the garden, the hidden chamber, the guard's pursuit. It was all connected, part of something much bigger than I could have imagined. But why me? Why had fate chosen to reveal these secrets to a simple night watchman? And more importantly, what was I going to do with this knowledge? I looked out the window, at the palace looming in the distance. Its windows glowed warmly, a beacon of stability and tradition. But now I knew the truth. Behind those walls lurked secrets and lies, a web of deceit that threatened everything we held dear. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, I made a decision. I couldn't ignore what I'd discovered. I had to act, to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. But where to start? Who could I trust? I thought of the mysterious woman again. She was the key to all of this, I was sure of it. I had to find her, to understand her role in this intricate dance of shadows and secrets. As I formulated a plan, a chill ran down my spine. I was no longer just Alfred the night watchman. I was now a player in a dangerous game, one where the stakes were higher than I could have ever imagined. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. The path ahead was fraught with danger, betrayal, and revelations that would shake the very foundations of our kingdom. But there was no turning back now. The truth called to me, a siren song I couldn't resist. And so, with the weight of secrets heavy on my shoulders, I stepped out into the dawn of a new day, ready to unravel the mystery that fate had thrust upon me. Little did I know, the journey ahead would test not only my courage, but also my very understanding of right and wrong. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of my cottage, casting long shadows across the floor. I hadn't slept a wink, my mind racing with the revelations of the night before. The metal box sat on my rickety table, its contents threatening to upend everything I thought I knew about the monarchy and my own place in this world. As I stared at the box, memories from my past began to surface, memories I'd long suppressed. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to be transported back to a time before I was Alfred the night watchman, to a life I'd left behind. I was born Alfred Blackwood, son of Margaret Blackwood, a palace maid. My father. Unknown, though whispers and sidelong glances had always made me suspect he was someone of importance. Growing up in the shadows of the palace, I learned early on to be invisible, to watch and listen without being seen. My mother, bless her soul, had always been tight-lipped about our history. "The past is best left in the past, Alfie," she'd say, her eyes clouding with a mix of fear and something else, regret perhaps. But now, as I sat here with a box full of royal secrets, I couldn't help but wonder if her silence had been about more than just protecting me. A particular memory surfaced, sharp and clear, as if it had happened yesterday. I was 12, polishing silverware in the grand dining room, when I overheard a heated conversation between two nobles. "Victoria's claim to the throne is tenuous at best," one had whispered. "If the truth ever came out—" "Hush," the other had interrupted, eyes darting around the room. They'd spotted me then, and their expressions had turned cold. "Boy, what are you doing here?" I'd mumbled an excuse about cleaning and scurried away, but the exchange had stuck with me. At the time, I dismissed it as adult talk I couldn't understand. Now, though, it took on a new, ominous meaning. Shaking off the memories, I turned my attention back to the letters. As I read through them, a pattern began to emerge. They spoke of a group called the Serpent's Crown, the same symbol I'd seen in the underground chamber. This group seemed to be pulling strings behind the scenes, manipulating the line of succession for generations. But why? And how did the mysterious woman in the garden fit into all this? A knock at the door startled me from my thoughts. I hastily shoved the box under my bed and went to answer, my heart pounding. To my relief, it was just old Tom, the groundskeeper. "Mornin', Alfred," he said, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Quiet night?" I forced a laugh, trying to keep my voice steady. "As always, Tom. Nothing ever happens around here, you know that." But as I said it, my eyes were drawn to something behind him, a flash of white among the rose bushes. The woman? I blinked, and it was gone. Was my mind playing tricks on me? Tom was speaking again. Something about pruning schedules, but I couldn't focus. That's when I noticed it. A small tattoo on his wrist, partially hidden by his sleeve. A serpent. My blood ran cold. Could Tom be involved? The kindly old groundskeeper who'd taken me under his wing when I first started working here? I made my excuses and shut the door, leaning against it as my mind raced. "Trust no one," a voice in my head whispered. But how could I uncover the truth if I couldn't trust anyone? I spent the rest of the day in a haze, going through the motions of my duties while my mind worked overtime. As night fell, I made a decision. I had to return to the underground chamber. Under the cover of darkness, I made my way back to the maze. The entrance to the chamber was hidden well. It took me nearly an hour of searching before I found the concealed trapdoor. Taking a deep breath, I descended into the darkness. The chamber looked different in the beam of my flashlight. Less mysterious, more real. I examined every inch of it, looking for any clue I might have missed. That's when I noticed something odd about one of the walls. It seemed newer than the others. I pressed against it, and to my surprise, it moved. A secret door. My heart raced as I pushed it open, revealing a narrow passageway beyond. The passage twisted and turned, leading deeper underground. The air grew colder, damper. Finally, it opened into another chamber, this one filled with files. Rows upon rows of filing cabinets, stretching as far as my light could reach. With trembling hands, I opened the nearest drawer. Inside were dossiers, hundreds of them, each bearing a name and a date. I recognized some of the names, nobles, politicians, even foreign dignitaries. But it was the information inside that made my blood run cold. Blackmail material, secrets. The kind of information that could destroy lives and topple governments. And at the bottom of each file, that same symbol, the serpent and the crown. As I stood there, surrounded by the dirty secrets of the powerful, a realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about the royal family. This was bigger, much bigger than I had imagined. The serpent's crown had its coils wrapped around the entire kingdom, maybe even beyond. A sound from the passage made me freeze. Footsteps coming closer. I quickly closed the drawer and looked for a place to hide, but it was too late. A figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light from the passage. "I was wondering when you'd find your way here, Alfred," a familiar voice said. I squinted, trying to make out the face. When I did, I nearly dropped my flashlight in shock. Mother?" I stammered. There she stood, Margaret Blackwood, looking not a day older than when I'd last seen her 10 years ago. But her eyes, they were different, harder, colder. "Oh, Alfie," she sighed, shaking her head. "You always were too curious for your own good, just like your father." My mind reeled. "My father? You know who he is?" She laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. "Of course I do. And so do you deep down. You've always known." As she spoke, pieces started falling into place. My unknown father, the whispers and glances, the tenuous claim to the throne. "No," I whispered, unwilling to believe it. "It can't be." "I'm afraid it is, my dear," another voice said, and a figure stepped out from behind my mother. The mysterious woman from the garden, her face no longer hidden by shadows. "Hello, Alfred," she said, her voice regal and cold. "I'm Queen Victoria, and I'm your half-sister." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I staggered back, my mind struggling to process this revelation. As I looked from my mother to Victoria, I saw the family resemblance I'd been blind to all these years. "Why?" I managed to choke out. "Why tell me now?" Victoria's smile was razor sharp. "Because, dear brother, you have a choice to make. Join us. Become part of something greater than yourself. Or..." She left the threat unspoken, but I could feel its weight in the air. As I stood there, caught between my past and an uncertain future, I realized that the real mystery was just beginning to unfold, and the choices I made next would not only determine my fate, but potentially the fate of the entire kingdom. The weight of my discoveries pressed down on me like a physical force as I made my way through the shadowy corridors of the palace. Every face I passed now seemed masked, every smile hiding potential betrayal. The serpent's crown's tendrils reached further than I had ever imagined, and I was caught in its coils. I needed to get word to the resistance, to warn them about what I'd overheard. But how could I be sure they weren't compromised as well? The paranoia that Victoria, the real Victoria, had advised was now threatening to overwhelm me. As I rounded a corner, lost in my thoughts, I nearly collided with someone. I looked up, apology on my lips, only to freeze. It was her, the false Queen Victoria. "Alfred," she said, her voice honey-sweet, but her eyes cold as ice. "Just the person I wanted to see. Walk with me." It wasn't a request. As we strolled through the royal gardens, the same gardens where this had all begun, she spoke of trivial matters, the weather, upcoming state functions, the new roses blooming in the southern beds. But beneath it all, I could sense a current of tension, of expectation. Finally, as we reached a secluded arbor, she turned to face me. "You've been busy, haven't you, Alfred?" My heart nearly stopped, but I forced my face to remain neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean, Your Majesty." Her laugh was like shattered glass. "Oh, come now. Did you really think we wouldn't notice your little nighttime excursions, your clandestine meetings? We've been watching you, Alfred, very closely." I felt the blood drain from my face. I can explain." "No need," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "In fact, I'm rather impressed. You've shown an aptitude for deception that could be quite useful to us. If properly directed, of course." My mind raced. Was this another test? A trap? Or was she genuinely offering me a chance to deeper embed myself in their organization? Before I could respond, she continued. "You see, Alfred, loyalty is a curious thing. It can be bought, certainly. But the most valuable loyalty is that which is freely given. So tell me, where does your loyalty truly lie?" I met her gaze, forcing myself not to flinch. "With the crown," I said carefully. "With the true ruler of this kingdom." Something flickered in her eyes. Triumph? Or suspicion? "Indeed," she murmured. "And who, in your estimation, is the true ruler?" It was a loaded question, a verbal minefield. But as I opened my mouth to answer, a commotion from the palace interrupted us. Guards were running, shouting orders. In the distance, I could hear the wail of sirens. The false Victoria's face hardened. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded of a guard who came running up. "Your Majesty," he panted, "there's been a breach. The underground chambers. They've been compromised." For a moment, just a moment, I saw real fear in the imposter's eyes. Then her mask slipped back into place. "Secure the palace," she ordered. "No one in or out. And you," she turned to me, "come with me. Now." As she led me swiftly back towards the palace, my mind was whirling. Had the resistance made their move? Or was this something else entirely? We descended into the depths of the palace, past layers of security I'd never known existed. Finally, we emerged into a high-tech command center, filled with screens displaying security feeds from across the kingdom. Lord Blackthorn was there, his face ashen. "It's worse than we thought," he said as we entered. "They've accessed the central database. Everything. They have everything. The false Victoria's composure finally cracked. "How?" she hissed. "How did they get past our defenses?" And that's when I saw it on one of the screens. A familiar face leading a team through the underground chambers. Old Tom. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The resistance hadn't been compromised. They'd been playing the long game all along. And now, they had what they needed to bring down the Serpent's crown. I must have made a sound, because suddenly all eyes were on me. The false Victoria's gaze was murderous. "You!" she snarled. "You led them to us!" I backed away, my hands raised. I swear, I didn't know. But even as I spoke, I knew it was over. My role as a double agent was exposed, and I was trapped in the Viper's nest. What happened next was a blur of action. Alarms blared, orders were shouted, and chaos erupted. In the confusion, I managed to slip away, my heart pounding as I ran through the twisting corridors of the underground complex. I could hear pursuit behind me, voices calling my name, some threatening, some pleading. My mother's voice rose above the rest, desperate and angry. "Alfred, please, don't throw away everything we've worked for." Her words only spurred me on. I ran blindly, taking turn after turn, until suddenly I burst out into the open air. I was in a part of the palace grounds I'd never seen before. A hidden courtyard surrounded by high walls. And there, standing in the center, was the real Queen Victoria. "Well done, Alfred," she said, her voice filled with warmth and pride. "You've played your part perfectly." Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by confusion. "I don't understand," I panted. How did you know?" She smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "My dear boy, we've known from the beginning. Every step you've taken, every secret message you passed, it was all part of the plan." The implications of her words hit me like a physical blow. You used me? All of this? It was a setup?" Victoria nodded solemnly. "It was necessary. We needed someone on the inside, someone they would believe was genuinely torn. Your confusion, your struggle, it had to be real." I felt as though the ground was shifting beneath my feet. "So the resistance, the safe house, it was all fake?" "Not fake," she corrected gently. "Just carefully orchestrated. We couldn't risk telling you everything. Your reactions had to be genuine for the plan to work." As the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, Victoria's expression turned urgent. "There's no more time for explanations now. You have a choice to make, Alfred. The final choice." She held out her hand, offering me a signet ring, the royal seal. "This kingdom needs a ruler, Alfred. Someone untainted by the corruption of the Serpent's crown. Someone with the strength to rebuild." I stared at the ring, my mind reeling. "But I'm not ready. I don't know how to rule a kingdom." Victoria's smile was sad but determined. "None of us are ever truly ready for the weight of the crown. But you have a good heart, Alfred. And sometimes, that's the most important quality a ruler can possess." As the doors burst open and guards flooded into the courtyard, I made my decision. I took the ring, feeling its weight, the weight of responsibility, of duty, of an entire kingdom's future. In that moment, as chaos erupted around us, I realized that my journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The Serpent's crown was unraveling, but the true test of my character and my reign lay ahead. The crown was heavy, but I was ready to bear its weight. For the sake of the kingdom, for the truth, and for the future we would build from the ashes of deceit. The days that followed were a whirlwind of revelations and revolutions. As news of the Serpent's crown's true nature spread, the kingdom was thrown into chaos. Protests erupted in the streets, long-buried secrets came to light, and the foundations of power that had stood for generations began to crumble. And there I was, thrust into the center of it all. Me, Alfred, Once a simple night watchman, now bearing the weight of a kingdom on my shoulders. The transition of power was far from smooth. Many refused to accept my claim to the throne, seeing me as an usurper or a puppet of yet another shadowy organization. Others rallied behind me, drawn by the promise of change and transparency that I represented. Through it all, the true Queen Victoria stood by my side, guiding me through the treacherous waters of politics and governance. But even as I leaned on her wisdom, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that lingered from her earlier deception. "You used me," I said to her one night, as we pored over documents detailing the extent of the Serpent's Crown's influence. "You put me in danger without my knowledge or consent." Victoria's face was etched with regret. "We did what we had to do, Alfred. The stakes were too high for half measures." I shook my head, frustration bubbling up. "And what makes you any different from them? Using people as pawns? Deciding what's best for everyone without their input?" Her eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and hurt. "We are different because our goal was not power for its own sake, but the well-being of the kingdom and its people. Sometimes, to fight monsters, we must employ monstrous methods." Her words haunted me, raising questions I had no easy answers for. Where was the line between necessary action and tyranny? How could I lead a kingdom towards transparency and justice when its very liberation was built on lies and manipulation? These questions plagued me as I worked tirelessly to dismantle the Serpent's Crown's network. Every day brought new challenges, rooting out corrupt officials, reforming institutions that had long been puppets of the secret organization, and trying to win the trust of a populace that had every reason to be skeptical of those in power. One of the hardest moments came when I had to confront my mother. She had been arrested along with other key members of the Serpent's Crown, and now sat across from me in a stark interrogation room, her eyes filled with a mixture of defiance and sorrow. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you do it?" She looked at me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the mother I remembered from my childhood. "Oh, Alfie," she sighed. "I wanted to give you everything. The Serpent's Crown promised power, influence, a chance to shape the world. I thought I was securing your future." I shook my head, fighting back tears. "At what cost, Mother? Look at what that pursuit of power has wrought." Her face hardened. "You're young, Alfred. Naive. You'll learn soon enough that power is the only true currency in this world. The Serpent's Crown may fall, but another will rise to take its place. It's the nature of the game." Her words chilled me, but they also strengthened my resolve. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze. "Then, I'll change the game." As I left the room, I knew that my mother's fate, like so many others, would be decided by the courts. But the true judgment, I realized, would come from history. Would we be remembered as liberators, or just another faction in an endless cycle of power struggles? Months passed, and slowly, painfully, the kingdom began to heal. We instituted sweeping reforms, dismantling the apparatus of secrecy and control that the Serpent's Crown had built. Transparency became our watchword, with every decision of the Crown open to public scrutiny. It wasn't easy. There were attempts on my life, whispers of new conspiracies forming in the shadows. But with each challenge we faced openly, with each truth we brought to light, I felt the kingdom growing stronger. 1 year to the day after I had taken the throne, I stood on the balcony of the palace, looking out over the capital. The city had changed, as had I. Gone was the wide-eyed night watchman, replaced by a leader who had been forged in the crucible of revolution and responsibility. As I gazed at the people below, going about their lives in a kingdom that was slowly learning to trust again, I felt a presence beside me. It was the true Victoria, her face showing the weariness of the battles we had fought, but also a glimmer of hope. "You've done well, Alfred," she said softly. "Your father would be proud." I turned to her, the question that had been burning inside me for so long finally finding voice. Was it worth it? All the lies, the manipulation? Can we truly build a better world on such a foundation? Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "But I do know this. The world is not divided into heroes and villains, Alfred. We are all capable of both great good and terrible evil, the choice of which path to follow. That's what defines us." I nodded slowly, understanding the truth of her words. We had fought monsters, yes, but in doing so, we had been forced to confront the monsters within ourselves. The legacy of the Serpent's Crown was not just the corruption it had spread, but the hard questions it forced us to ask about power, morality, and the true meaning of leadership. As the sun set over the kingdom, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, I made a silent vow. I would not be a perfect king, no one could be, but I would strive every day to be a just one. To make decisions not based on secretive agendas or the accumulation of power, but on what was best for the people I had sworn to serve. The Serpent's Crown had been broken, but its shadow still lingered. It was up to us, up to me, to ensure that from its ashes, a new era of transparency and justice could arise. As I turned to go back inside, to face the countless challenges that awaited me, I paused. "Victoria," I said, "thank you for everything." She smiled, a true smile that reached her eyes. "No, Alfred, thank you for reminding an old queen that there's still hope for this world." Together, we walked back into the palace, ready to face whatever the future might hold. The game had changed, and with it, the rules. But one thing remained constant: the power of truth, of justice, and of the indomitable human spirit. As I took my seat in the throne room, I couldn't help but wonder, what tales would be told of this time in years to come? Would we be remembered as the breakers of chains, or merely another link in an endless cycle? Only time would tell. But for now, we had a kingdom to rebuild, and a future to shape. The legacy of the Serpent's Crown would not be one of shadows and secrets, but of light, of truth, and of the eternal struggle for justice. And so, my reign began in earnest, not as a conclusion, but as a new chapter in an ongoing story. The story of a kingdom, a people, and a young king determined to make a difference.